Where is the capitalist system going? Well, let me be as blunt with you here as I know how. The history of capitalism for 300 years, wherever it has come, has been a history that deserves the word instability stamped on its forehead. The system is fundamentally unstable. What does that mean? Every 4 to 7 years on average, the system tanks. What does that mean? Suddenly, large numbers of people are thrown out of work. Large numbers of businesses go bankrupt. Large numbers of businesses cut back production from what it had been. Okay, that sudden bang. Sometimes it doesn't last very long and it doesn't affect too many people. Short and shallow, we say. And sometimes it is very serious. It's long and deep. The one in the 1930s, very long, very deep. The one since 2008, quite long, very deep. Others, shallow and short. But if you assume that the future of capitalism is more or less likely to be the 300 years of capitalism, during which every conceivable effort was made to stop this instability, to prevent it, to overcome it, to shorten it, and you can see the success of it by noticing that we're in one now. So the 300 years of effort to stop it failed. By the way, just again, between the end of the Great Depression, 1941, and the beginning of the one we're in now, 2008, the National Bureau of Economic Research, which is the government agency that monitors these things, counts 11 economic downturns between 1941 and 2008. That's where you get the 4 to 7 year average. Okay, when was the last bottom of the cycle? 2009. Do some arithmetic. 4 to 7, 2009, we're overdue for one, aren't we? Which is why on Wall Street, if you follow the financial press, the assumption is in the next 6 to 18 months, we're going to have a downturn. Well, whoa, we're not out of the 2008 disaster. We've got a level of people with debts they cannot afford to miss a payment on. If we get suddenly millions of people thrown out of work with another downturn, the kind that would come if the shipping companies of the world have no demand to meet by renting out their ships to carry stuff, if the mass of people are not in a mood to spend money, if they can't borrow more because they're already loaded up to here with debt, then we're looking at a situation in the near future when we're going to have an economic downturn in an already fragile economic situation. That's not good, folks. And that doesn't suggest anything is going to happen in this society to undo the inequality that keeps getting worse, to undo the instability, which is about to explode on us again. There's nothing happening to slow down automation. In fact, the use of robots is accelerating in a whole line of productions here in the United States and elsewhere. And ditto, the movement of production out of the United States continues. So we're not seeing any sign of a change or anything that could be happening that would produce a reversal of what has agitated politics in this country so extremely as we now see it. Mr. Trump is going to have his work cut out for him, big time. Handling these problems, trying to deliver on the real demand of the people who voted for him, which is for some real change in their situation. How's he going to do that, given the commitments he's made, given who he is, given who he's going to bring into power? True, he may deflect everybody's attention by saying outrageous things about Mexicans or half the population. Maybe he will. Maybe he'll figure out that deflecting people away from the basic issues that upset them, which is, after all, what the election did for a year, is his best hope to keep the hype going, to keep the circus and the theater going so that people don't But it didn't work for any of his predecessors to keep doing what they were doing in the hope that whatever got them into office, if they just kept doing it, it would keep them into office. If you noticed anything about the last 5 presidents, by the end of the time of their term, Americans hated them. Couldn't wait to get them out. Obama's a little unusual. He didn't have that. People haven't turned against him. But Bush, you remember? The end of Bush's term, at the end of Clinton's term, at the end, they're all, those Americans have enough because of that betrayal. But if Mr. Trump thinks he can just ride along like all the others, he will be committing the same mistake that allowed him to get into office. He will not have learned from that at all. And if we add to that an economic downturn that is going to plunge a generation of students with already too much debt, with already too limited job situations, with an even worse one as they emerge out of college, we might begin to see things that make Occupy Wall Street look like a picnic in comparison with the level of accumulated anger. Because we haven't begun to see, we've only seen the mildest forms of upset. Occupy Wall Street was very peaceful, was very low-key. Bernie Sanders' campaign, basically the same. And given what the Black Lives Matter responded to, the slaughter of people by the police, their response has been pretty low-key. That's not likely to continue. At least in the past, that's not the way these things usually go. So let me scare you with one thing. There are, of course, people who are excited about Mr. Trump's gain, who are the David Dukes of this world, the people who have a different political agenda, an old ideological agenda of the sort that you all know and don't need me to tell you about. No one knows how much reliance Trump will put on them, what positions in government he will allow them to have, nor what they will do if they get such positions. But knowing who they are and what they will feel now emboldened to do, my guess is they will be provocative. And my guess is a lot of people, like those in this room, will react. That could spin out of control. That's a whole nother game. Then you have the polarization of the two sides, and Mr. Trump can play the game as if he is bringing them together when in fact he's repressing one in favor of the other. That's an old game too. If I were watching, and which I will be, that's what I will be watching for. And that's what I'll be talking to you about in the months ahead, whether we begin to see signs of that, where they are, and how they are going. But I don't want to end today without leaving you with 2 more insights about what's going on. There is also, because of the difficulties corporations are having, difficulties, and I want to explain the difficulties. In the end, a capitalist system, like any other system, needs all the different parts of it to play their assigned role. Capitalism doesn't work if the mass of workers don't go to work and do the work. If you didn't go, the game is over. You got to go and work, and then you got to go to the mall and buy the fruits of your work. You've got to play both sides of that game, otherwise it doesn't work. But capitalism is a system that is internally messed up, or to use Marx's term, it's contradictory. Every capitalist is always trying to save on labor costs, to get a cheaper worker to replace a more expensive worker, to get a machine to replace any worker, to get a worker to accept lower wages than he or she did before. They're always trying to save on labor costs because it gives them more profits. And then they're always surprised when they discover that the success they've had in cutting down their labor costs, which means they're giving less money to the workers, means, here you go, the workers don't have the money to buy the stuff. What they gain by squeezing their workers, they lose because they've just squeezed their customers. Capitalism can't get out of this dilemma because it's the nature of capitalism. To get out of that dilemma is to give up the capitalism, which, this should come as not a major surprise, the capitalists don't want to do. So they're forever caught in this dilemma. They have no way out. Oh, they can postpone the dilemma. You know how they do that? You all know how they do that. How can they keep you buying even though they're not raising your wages? How can they get you to buy more and more even though they're not paying you to do it? The answer is the plastic in your wallet, debt. You can borrow because that allows you to spend and they don't have to pay you. This is wonderful. Of course you should have 12 credit cards in your wallet. Of course you should borrow for college. Of course you should borrow for your car, your house. Borrow, 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 because it's the capitalist dream. He gets the customers. He doesn't have to pay you anything. In fact, he takes the extra profits made from not paying you, saving on labor. He takes the extra profits. Ready? Because if you get this, you'll understand capitalism and you'll become its enemy. He takes the extra profits from not paying the workers and lends it to them so they can buy on credit what he's selling them. You get it? He squeezes you as a worker and then lends you so he can squeeze you as a borrower too. The only thing worse than that reality is the number of American citizens who are grateful for the opportunity. You are complicit in your own screwing, which is not a compliment. Mr. Trump will be no more able to change the basic conditions of the capitalism that afflicts the American people than any of his predecessors were. Not one bit. There's nothing in his history, nothing in his programs that indicate. Could he develop it? Sure, I can't predict the future any better than anybody else can. But why anyone in their right mind should imagine that this man, by virtue of his election, is going to raise wages where they've been falling, improve job security where it has been declining, get the students out of their debts? Stop. Nothing. There's no reason to expect any of it. Which means that Mr. Trump is setting himself up for exactly the same betrayal that people feel about Obama and about all the people before Obama. He's in line to do the same thing. There are wisecracking Democrats in Washington, the few that have a sense of humor, who are telling the Clintons, it's good that you lost, because the economic downturn that's coming, and I'm going to talk to you more about that, is now going to be his problem. It would have been your problem. And the truth of it is, these Democrats know the Clintons haven't a better clue what to do than does Mr. Trump. So the irony is, here is also an opportunity for what? Well, the candidate who comes out best at the end of all this carnage, all the nasty things Clinton said about Trump, all the nasty things Trump said about Clinton. You know who looks whiter than white, if I can abuse the metaphor? Bernie Sanders. There's nothing that's clinging to him that looks or smells like what clings to the others. He looks wonderful. He comes out clean. That's a very important thing, because that lesson is slowly percolating through the culture. And it carries implications that are going to be played out in the months and years ahead. Here's the second opportunity. It's possible for us, and by here I mean the broad left, and I don't usually talk like that because the broad left, for most of my, there's no symbolism involved here. None. Purely electronic event. He's not president yet. We have a chance as a left, now that we are much larger and know ourselves to be larger, now that we have shown that 13 million Americans will vote for somebody who says, yeah, I'm a socialist. Granted, he's the most moderate socialist one can imagine, although there are now Europeans trying to out-moderate him, and succeeding. The French come to mind right away, but we'll come back to that. There is now, I think, an opportunity to say, if the left can get its act together, that the problem here is a capitalism that has been no good for the majority of people for 40 years. That's our problem. Changing our leaders has made no major difference in that basic story. So changing them again from an Obama to a Trump, or from a Trump to whoever the next one is, that's not a solution. We don't have to make that case. That's not very hard to make. People already get that. That'll be easy. Well, then what do? We've got to change the economic system so it isn't driven by huge wealthy corporations that have the incentive and the resources to keep moving in the direction that has produced the deterioration for the last 40 years. And it's a very easy deterioration to describe. That's not going to be changed until you reorganize the decision-making apparatus. The decision to move a plant from here to there, the decision to destroy these jobs and replace them with robots and tell the people whose jobs have been replaced, you're on your own, get lost, go work, become a greeter at Walmart if you're lucky, or flip hamburgers. That's it, you're done. This society has no obligation towards you, no place for you, no understanding of what the impacts on your family, friends, neighbors, none of it. We're free to screw you every which way, as we have been doing. An alternative to that, an economic system built in a different way, giving the power of making these decisions to the mass of people and not to private capital, that's our only way out of this. If we do it, we build the basis for what? We build the basis for a new political party. Because such a movement to change the economy has to have a political expression. It has to have an agency that goes around and explains to everybody else what it's doing and why it's doing it. Because the support will be there if we do it. This will be a political party whose goal is to reduce the footprint of capitalism in our economy and to raise the footprint of an alternative system, which you can call worker co-ops, which I do, or worker self-directed enterprises, or a different way of organizing production so that people together democratically decide what to produce, how to produce, where to produce, and what to do with the profits. That solves our problems, and you need a political party that will advocate for that kind of change. And by doing that, we'll show that the Republicans and Democrats are advocates for the continuation of capitalism. They just differ on exactly how to do it. The Republicans more aggressive and stick it to the working class, the Democrats not as bad. But two parties that are two wings of the same economic commitment means you don't have any real choice unless another party comes along, which is another argument for its emergence. We are strong enough to do that now. Occupy showed us a beginning. Bernie showed us an enormous step forward. I'm very impressed in recent weeks that the Black Lives Matter movement is taking more and more interest in these economic questions and taking position. So there's another leg, signs. And all of this amidst the deterioration of capitalism, which is what I'm going to turn to for the rest of my talk. But we have an opportunity here. It is not just a defeat. The biggest defeat suffered here is by the establishments of the two major parties who really have taken it on the chin. It's their own fault. I'm not asking any of you to have any sympathy with them at all. They don't deserve it. They eagerly pushed every critical impulse out. Eagerly. For them, the left has been irrelevant, marginal, dismissible, contemptible. That's how they react. Nor do I think this Trump's defeat of them will teach them much. I think they're beyond it. They've been doing this for too long. They're too deep into this rut. They're going to continue doing it. And as I begin to read the interpretations of Trump's victory, you can already see how they're interpreting it as being, we're not going to give it up. For example, the interpretation, this is all about racism, or this is all about immigration, or this is all about grabbing women's genitals. Horrible as all those parts of this game were, they're not what this game is fundamentally about. And it's a mistake to go in that direction because it loses us the sense of where we can go to change this. What's the option? Again, there is an option. I learned today of a group of cab drivers in Austin, Texas, 360 of them, who just formed a cooperative taxi business. They were successful in driving Uber and Lyft out of Austin. They were there, they're gone, and in their place is this worker cooperative that has set up in Austin, Texas, to run that business. And that business is attracting worker co-ops quite a bit. Our little organization, Democracy at Work, is working with one in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is likewise trying to set up this kind of business. Why do I talk to you so much about worker co-op businesses? Because it's an alternative to capitalism. It's a way out. It's something to do. It's a direction to take to get out of this mess which is deteriorating and presenting us with the Trumps of this world. You know that Trump is not unique. The establishment in England thought that everybody would vote to stay in Europe. They didn't. It's the exact same story. If I understand correctly, the liberal socialist president of France currently gets an approval rating of 4%, which is an achievement. I don't believe any leader has ever achieved this before. And wow. He's a socialist in the sense he went along with everything. He didn't think there would be anger and upset against going along, saying that at least he's not as bad as the conservatives in France, and he isn't. Just like the Democrats here aren't as bad as the Republicans. They aren't. But we're not at that anymore. That won't work. That won't cut it anymore. It's done. And Mr. Hollande is discovering that to his sorrow. The Syriza government in Greece is on the edge of discovering the same thing. The Portuguese government, which I believe I've told you is an alliance of the communist, socialist, and green parties. That's the government of Portugal. I'm sure you all knew that, right? That the government of Portugal is a coalition of those three parties, because the press in this country would want you to know that the people of Portugal made that decision in their last election. Yes, they did. They're all worried. They don't know where to go. Let me be so bold. Here is where you go. You develop a worker co-op sector. You say, this is a way for you to have a job where the job and the security and the income are the number one priority, not profit. You're not driven by profit first and everything else later. Profit is second or third or fourth. First is the quality and the quantity of the relationships and the security and the income of your workplace. That's a worker co-op. It's what it's always been designed to be. Build that sector of an economy. Let the people in this society begin to see what that's like, and they'll vote with their feet. That's where they'll go and shop. Just like they now, some of you shop for fair-traded coffee. Wouldn't you shop for something that said made in a worker co-op in a democratically run enterprise rather than a top-down one that uses child labor in Indonesia, etc., etc.? Come on. A democratic enterprise? What an interesting slogan in a country that takes democracy seriously, or says it does, to democratize the enterprise. Make democracy there. Get rid of the autocrats at the top. You know, you could throw the desks into the river and call it a tea party. Why not? Let me close with reminding you of what has been done in a country very like our own, Great Britain. For those of you that I've told this before, bear with me. Britain has two parties like the United States. They're not called Republican Democrat, they're called Conservative and Labor Party. The second party is the Labor Party, sort of like our Democratic Party, and the Conservatives are like our Republicans. The Labor Party has a Bernie Sanders of its own. The man's name is Jeremy Corbyn, C-O-R-B-Y-N. I believe that's how it's spelled, C-O-R-B-Y-N. He has been elected now twice in a year because the center of their party, like the center of the Democratic Party, was very upset with their Bernie Sanders, and so they tried to get rid of him. So they had a second election in the year. He did better in the second election than he did in the first, so they couldn't get rid of him. He's the head of the Labour Party. Why am I telling you this? Because the Labour Party in England has a program commitment. This is what it will do if it wins the election, which is scheduled for 2017 or maybe 18, I don't know, either next year or the year after. Here's the commitment. It will become law, if the Labour Party wins, that any enterprise in England, any enterprise that either contemplates closing or moving out of the country or becoming a public company in the sense of issuing shares, a public offering, any company that plans to do any of those things will be required by law to give their own workers the right of first refusal to buy the company. That the company cannot close, cannot move, and cannot sell itself to any other company, that's another thing, can't do that, without first giving the workers the right to take the place over and run it as a worker co-op. Only if the workers refuse will the company be free to explore those other options. Plank number 2, the government pledges to provide the money to enable the workers to buy the company in order to create in England a worker co-op sector of the economy. And for those of you who don't know, such a sector of a capitalist economy already exists. Spain has it through the Mondragon experiment, and Emilia-Romagna, that district of the state inside Italy, also has that. So we already have examples of it. We have the examples, we know how to do it, we know where it's been done, we have the expert, we can do this. There's only the political will in this country to advance such a program and to go to the people and say, this is a way out of a 40-year deterioration that is punctuated by the lunacy of these election campaigns.